Let's start with Jake Browning, I guess. I tweeted something after the game. I think Mina tweeted something similar at various points. That was a game I didn't think Jake Browning was capable of.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I mean, that's, of course, like the way that you have to go about it. Anybody that was sitting here outside of maybe kin to Jake Browning that said that they would have expected this is lying. He basically had the best version of an NFL game that he possibly could. But to me, it's I kind of laugh because on the timeline, I think people were saying this and most were joking, but I think some weren't joking where they were like, see, Burrow's a system quarterback. He's not really that good.
Right.
Because everybody, when Burrow was coming out of the draft, Burrow doesn't have this like insane arm talent or these this insane like these physical gifts. And so I think a lot of people have looked at Burrow and they've been like, nah, he's just like a system dude. He's a facilitator. He's a point guard type of a quarterback. Like there's a bunch of people that are better than him. Like a lot of people will use that argument if they want to say that Josh Allen's better than him, that Justin Herbert's better than him, that Lamar Jackson's better than him, like all that. And so last night was kind of these people that were talking about how Burrow and Browning are like these system quarterbacks. And to me, obviously saying that is too far. But I do think that last night was a great reminder of just because the quarterback is the most important piece to the puzzle, that doesn't mean the other pieces that you acquire aren't good. Like we watched Jamar Chase go off last night. I mean, like he had a takeover type of performance. We saw some huge catches from T. Higgins. Tyler Boyd, all right, maybe not a great quarterback, but like Tyler Boyd had some good plays. Joe Mixon had some good plays. Like this showed me that the Cincinnati Bengals, it reminded me that the Cincinnati Bengals have a really good offense. And I think that those pieces that are there are still talented, even if it's not Joe Burrow passing them the ball. So, no, I don't think that Joe Burrow is a full product of the environment that he is in Cincinnati. He is the most important piece of that puzzle. You're not going to hear me say otherwise. But last night was a good reminder of just because they don't play quarterback doesn't mean those really talented guys like T. Higgins, like Jamar Chase, like the latter, they don't bring things to the table because they do, and they were able to show it last night.
I thought last night was a really interesting example of, a lot of times you get to a backup quarterback or a young quarterback or, not the starter, not the star that you're confident in, and you have to change the offense and you have to figure out, okay, how do we get this guy going? How do we put him in the best position to succeed? And I think there's a lot of debate about how you're supposed to do that, right? And the instinctive default approach for a lot of coaches tends to be, let's run the ball on first and second down. Let's try and, take the workload off them. And oftentimes that can be actually work against what you're trying to do, right? All you do by running on first and second down is put yourself in third and long. And now your young, inexperienced quarterback has got to execute 3rd and 8 instead of 3rd and 2 or whatever. It's just more difficult. This felt like the game that all those coaches try and manufacture, where they try and get him a bunch of easy throws early, they try and get him into a rhythm, and he gets there. Like, he actually gets into the groove. And, like, this was the thing about this game. It started off, and it looked similar to what the Patriots were trying to do earlier in the week with Bailey Zappi, right? Like, let's get him a bunch of easy stuff. Let's not ask him to do anything difficult. And his first quarter grade is, like, middling. It's 60-something. He was 8 for 8. But they were for 40-something yards. It was all underneath bubble screens, actual screens, insta-read things. It was like one play where he had to go from one side to the next, and even that was a short pass. It was all kind of quick stuff. Let's just get him happy. Let's get him in sync. And then it's like he did. He got in the zone. Like, they actually successfully activated Jake Browning. Like, he got into that groove. And later in the game, he was just cooking. Like, that first quarter seemed to get him into the feel of the game, and he actually did reach that sort of, flow state that they're all trying to get these quarterbacks into.
Yeah, and I think that, there are a couple of plays that go a long way into that, right? I mean, I think that Chase Brown's long run goes into that because there's an explosive that you kind of weren't expecting. Obviously, the touchdown to Jamar Chase is like, damn, okay, because when you think about it, I agree completely with what you were saying. When you go into an approach as an offense coordinator and you're like, well, we've got to kind of limit things a little bit. We've got to lean on the run game more. Well, what do you think the defense is thinking?
Right.
They're thinking the same thing. They're thinking this dude's trash. This guy's not Joe Burrow. Let's get after his ass. And so you're going to play a lot of single high stuff because you don't feel like you have to allocate 2 guys deep. So you're going to play a lot of single high stuff. You're going to be able to stack the box. You're going to be able to get more aggressive. You're going to be able to play run blitzes. And so if you're just running the ball on obvious situations on, especially if you get into these situations that are, okay, maybe we're not running the ball on first down, but let's do a short pass on first down. Oh, shoot, it went incomplete. Now let's run it. Let's run it on 2nd and 10. It's like, all right, you're becoming so predictable at this point. The defense can get overly aggressive. But when you're able to hit a couple of these explosives and when you are able to, of course, put the defense on their heels, then all of a sudden it's almost worse because they weren't expecting this out of a quarterback that wasn't very good. And so it almost shell shocks them even more. And I think the Jamar Chase catch that ended up going for a long touchdown on Tyson Campbell, that's one where you go, shit, what do we do now? They were not expecting that kind of a play, that kind of a throw from him, and it absolutely burns him. And in a very close game where, okay, sometimes they were ahead by a touchdown, sometimes they were behind. Like, it was just a very back and forth 1-score game basically the whole time. You can't afford to take these crazy risks. If they were up double digits, maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe you can stay aggressive. But I agree with you. You have to be able to, even with a backup quarterback, you got to be able to play to their strengths. There's no doubt about it. But you got to run things that are still going to be able to move the ball through the air. You cannot become predictable in what you do. You cannot just sit here and say, oh, a good run game is going to be the best friend of a backup quarterback that's in there. Because where that is true, it's not just a run game that is the best friend of a backup quarterback. It is an effective run game. And how are you an effective run game? You've got to keep the defense on their heels. You've got to lighten up the box a little bit. You've got to be able to give them some looks they were not expecting in the passing game, even if it's shorter stuff. So it really did feel like a perfect game plan that was manifested last night for the Cincinnati Bengals, for them to come away with that victory and for Jake Browning to be able to play the way that he did. Not to take anything away from him because he still did it. But it was a great game plan from what that offensive staff in Cincinnati put out there.
Yeah, Browning's PFF grade in the first quarter for that game, 74.3, and from that point on, the second quarter into overtime, it ended up being that's I'm looking at downs. That was 60-something, 69 in the first quarter, nice. And then 91 point something for quarters 2 onwards. Like, he went from executing.
Damn, it was elite. He hit the elite mark.
He went from awesome. Executing, a very simple game plan pretty well in the first quarter to absolutely taking over. So 64.6 in that first quarter. So basically exactly average, just executing what he was asked, doing nothing above and beyond, nothing crazy, and then 91.3 from the second quarter into overtime. Jake Browning found the groove that everybody tries to get those young quarterbacks into, because this is the interesting element, right? This is the crux of the Ryan Leaf, Mina Kimes argument. All of these guys that make it to the NFL have talent. You can't make it as far as this by being a total and complete bum who has nothing, no ability to do anything. You're a talented quarterback if you've made it as far as the NFL. Now, where Mina's point is, you're comparing these guys against other elite quarterbacks. And even in this game, Jake Browning is being directly compared to both Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 overall pick, and Joe Burrow, a number 1 overall pick, because he's the guy not there. And it's in comparison to those guys that they look bad, right? But a lot of the times the difference between that can be, do you hit that groove where you're just in the zone and you're playing at your best self? And Browning hit that in this game. This is not going to be his baseline, but for 3-4 quarters, if you count overtime, he hit that flow state where he's capable of being Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence and doing almost the same things. He doesn't have quite the same physical tool set, but he shows that even a Jake Browning or, insert whatever quarterback you like as a backup, they have the ability to tap into that zone where they're playing their best football, and that looks great.
Well, look, all kind of jokes aside that I said at the beginning of the podcast, this is sort of a similar story to that of Brock Purdy, where Purdy's best attribute as a quarterback is how confidently he plays. He doesn't have the best arm talent in the NFL. He's not the most mobile dude in the NFL. He can't throw it from all sorts of different arm angles and flick it 60 yards down the field and all that kinds of stuff. He's not going to throw it on a frozen rope like you'll see a lot of other quarterbacks do in the NFL. What makes Purdy so valuable and what makes him so effective is how confidently he plays the game. Playing with confidence is the key to unlocking whatever talent that you have. And last night, you're right. Maybe it was a little bit of a slow burn for Jake Browning, but once he got into a rhythm, he felt like he was Tom Brady out there, right? He felt like, oh, I can make every throw. Of course I can. Look at us. We're not out of this game. The Jags were one win last night away from being the number one seed in the AFC. And by the time we got to that second quarter, like you mentioned, Jake Browning's like, nah, we're better. Doesn't matter. We're better than this team. And he believed it. And I think that's the performance that you saw last night. What confidence can do for a player is take what is a true statement that Mina Kimes probably said last week, where she was like, hey, when you look at his track record of who he has been in the NFL, he is just not a serviceable starting QB. Because up to that point, before last night, that was a true statement. But it was the fact that he played with so much confidence in whatever he is capable of, he will perform to the best of his abilities. And we have seen, to your very point, when you get to the NFL, if you play with as much confidence to unlock your talent, whatever level that is, you can sling the pill. You can play pretty good ball. You can go out and win an NFL game, even on the road, even in Monday Night Football, even in those situations. And so hat off to Jake Browning and what he was able to do to just believe in himself, because a lot of guys say that, right? A lot of guys say, oh yeah, like I've got all the confidence in the world in my guys, I believe I can go out there and do this and that. But sometimes the tape tells a different story. The tape told that exact story for Jake Browning last night.